We are going to solve now by completing the square. So if you don't remember, solving means to find the x-intercepts. We also call them the zeros or the roots. Okay, so I want to know what they are. I'm going to start. I'm going to do this by completing the square. So first I need to get the x squared term by itself. And then I always put plus blank and plus blank. Whatever I add to the left, I need to add to the right. Half of 6 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. So I add 9 to this side, I need to add 9 to this side. The perfect square here is x minus 3. Remember, if you took x minus 3 times x minus 3 and then did the box method, you'd get x squared minus 6x plus 9. And over here, I have positive 2. Now, in the past, to move this into vertex form, I'd subtract 2 from both sides. But I don't need to do that because what I want to do now is solve. And so this should look a lot like the problems that we've already done with if they're already in vertex form and we're solving using algebra. So you need to square root both sides. Square root of 2, you can't reduce that any, so I've got x minus 3 on this side. This is where I break it into 2. Positive square root of 2 and negative square root of 2. Add 3 to both sides. And we get x equals 3 plus the square root of 2 and 3 minus the square root of 2. These are your two answers where this function crosses the x-axis. I'm going to have to do one more example. It's a little tougher. All right. So the reason this one's a little tougher is because 5 isn't a nice even number that divides in half. So we're going to get a fraction, and that's okay. So we've got x squared plus 5x plus something equals 3 plus that same something. I need to divide this in half, so 5 divided by 2. I'm just going to leave it as 5 halves, because for me, at least, it's way easier to square it like this, because when I square 5 halves, I get 25 fourths. If I add 25 fourths to this side, I need to add 25 fourths to this side. So that means my perfect square here is going to be x plus 5 halves squared equals 3 plus 25 fourths. Well, if I'm going to do that, I need to change 3 into something fourths. So I believe that that's 12 fourths. It's 25 fourths. Gives me 37 fourths, as long as I did my math right. And now I'm going to square root. When I square root, I get two answers. I get the square root of 37 fourths, but both plus and minus. And this over here is x plus 5 halves. So the nice part about 37 fourths, if there is a nice part about it, is that 4 is a perfect square. So I'm not going to have to rationalize the denominator. So the square root of 37 is going to stay on the top. I could write it like this, but the square root of 4 we know. So I'm going to write a 2 down there. And now I still have this. And this is where I break it into 2. And I get to, let's see, x plus 5 halves. I'm sorry, that's not right. It'll just, I'm going to, oh yes, it was right. I just can't think this morning, I guess. Equals positive square root of 37 over 2. And x minus 5 halves equals negative square root of 37 halves. Add 5, subtract 5 halves from both sides. And I get x equals the square root of 37 over 2 minus 5 over 2, or the square root, negative square root of 37 halves minus 5 halves. So these are your two answers. And if you wrote them the other way, that would be okay too. If you wrote this number first, plus square root of 37 halves, or negative 5 halves minus the square root of 37 halves. That's okay. You may also see in my answer key that because they have a common denominator, you can add across the top and keep the denominator the same. So another way to write this would be negative 5 plus the square root of 37 over 2, negative 5 minus the square root of 37 over 2. And I can combine them because they have a common denominator. Or the last way you might see this is negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 37 over 2. And so you might see any of these ways. Any would be completely acceptable to me for you to do as an answer. There is, I think it's actually 2 worksheets in the folder. It looks like 2 worksheets. It says like day 7 and 8 completing the square. You guys get to do both. Okay, so we're not splitting these into 2. We're just going to do them all. So day 7, I think the answers are a little bit nicer, but then day 8, they're not so nice. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're going through them, that you are responsible for both day 7 and 8 as your homework tonight.